You're liars. If you think that leadership is merely screaming and shouting and scaring your people, then you're lying to yourself. I can remember when I was in the army, I had a drill sergeant. And every time he told me to do something, I did it immediately. Not because I respected him, not because I wanted to, but because I was scared of him. And that is not leadership. Leadership requires the verb that's in there, to lead, which physically means to take somebody by the hand and lead them. Now, there's three concepts in leadership that I briefly want to discuss. Unfortunately, I only have 2.5 hours. Sorry, it's half an hour. So the three concepts that I want to look at, the first one is what I call the leadership flag. So what we did, took the word leadership and created an acronym out of it. Now, I know Warren Buffett did it before, but the words that he used didn't really have the oomph to give the meaning that we wanted to use. The reason for the flag is, if you think of medieval times, the castles, especially the British and the French in Europe, and that the castle would fly this flag, and that would be their colors, and it would depict a certain family or clan, and they were loyal to that, and they were proud of those flags that they flew. Ships fly flags to tell you, are they at war, are they at peace, is it a hospital ship, is it a pirate ship? And if you look at the United States especially, they are very passionate about their flag. If you remember, a while back they had the story with the baseball, another baseball team, the basketball team that didn't come out with the singing of the anthem or something, and there was this big thing, and they felt that it was an embarrassment to the flag and that. So they swear allegiance to a flag, not to a person or president or a king. In the same way, we've used the flag, and the idea being that you then must swear allegiance to the leadership flag. So if we look at the word leadership, I'm not going to go through the whole acronym and explain everything. I'll briefly explain to you what each letter stands for, and then what I want to do is use a couple of personal examples from my own life to give you an indication of how I see and why I believe that those particular words fit those letters. So the L in leadership is lifestyle. Your lifestyle that you live. So if you want to be a leader of people, or you want to lead a team, you need to be the role model. You need to live a lifestyle that isn't embarrassing. So there's no point in you being this prim and proper person at work in your suit and tie, and on Friday night you go out and you get drunk and it gets pasted all over social media. That's definitely not leading the right lifestyle. To use an example, my son was in boarding school. So every Sunday, I used to travel 50 kilometers, go drop him off at boarding school, and every Friday I used to go and fetch them. The principal said they weren't boarders, they were weekly boarders, because they didn't stay there. In the olden days, apparently you stayed for the whole term, and then you went home on the bus. But I had to travel the N1 there and the N1 back. This is in Cape Town. And one particular Friday, I was coming back, on the way back to Cape Town again, driving along the N1, and I had this minibus taxi. Then he was behind me, then he was beside me, then he couldn't get past, and then he was behind me, and then he was right up my butt. And I just blew my gasket, and I hammered the brake, and the car came to a screeching halt, and this taxi went just about screaming off into the bushes, and I uttered that language that we use when we're slightly upset. And here's my son, he's in, I think he was grade 9 or grade 10 at that stage. And a couple of months later, we were driving again, and there was some guy sitting behind me, and he says to me, hit the brakes, hit the brakes. I said to him, why? No, you did it with a taxi. So, and then I realized that we do things sometimes out of frustration or without thinking, and what we actually do is we set a bad example, and our kids are very susceptible. So there's a video clip that's on YouTube. The guy's had a couple of million views. He won the International Toastmaster competition. And he talks about words as well. And he says that if you are a person in authority or in a leadership figure, a single word, people will believe you simply because they trust you as the leader. So that lifestyle that you live, it can be dangerous. The E is for example. Now, lifestyle and example, they sound the same, but the example we're talking about here is you as the leader set the example by being prepared to do what you expect your followers to do. So if people are packing up tables and carting it, I need to roll up my sleeves and be up front, and I need to help them move the tables and the rest. I can't stand there barking orders, because then I'm not setting an example. The A represents authority. Now, authority, not power. So I can have authority and I can inspire people without necessarily having to enforce power. Authority also refers to the lines of authority. And the important thing in authority is that you need to do what you said you were going to do. So if I promised you that if you made target, you could get the weekend off, I can't at the weekend come and suddenly say, sorry, yeah, we're a bit busy and we're short-staffed, so you can't get off. I promised you. The opposite is also true. If I promise to punish you if you didn't do something, I have to punish you. I can't not do it, because I create what we call a precedent. Now, I had an incident like that when I worked for an audiovisual company in Cape Town years ago. I was the internal auditor, and I was tasked with writing an administrative manual for the company because there wasn't one, and everybody was invoicing in their own way and doing their own thing, and the CEO wanted a particular procedures manual. Took me 2.5 months to write. I eventually ran it past the board a couple of times, and the CEO signed off on it, and I said to him, okay, you happy? I can now enforce this. Great, he said, off you go. And the first branch I got to happened to be one of his favorite managers, because this guy made target and he made big bucks for the company. And this guy went, and contrary to what the procedure said, and I took him on. And the next minute he's on the phone and he phones the CEO, and I get called in the next day, and I get told, yeah, but remember, he's one of our best people and this and that. And I said to him, but it doesn't work that way. You signed off on it, your signature's on this, you told me I got to enforce it. I can't have one way for one person or one way for another person. And that is the authority. So that we have a problem with that. The D in leadership is for discipline. Effectively, it refers to discipline, but also self-discipline. But the major component here is seeing the task through to the end. You can't, as a leader, start something and then expect somebody else to finish it. You need to finish what you started and see it through to the end. E, the second E, is emotionally intelligent. Not emotional intelligence. There's a similarity, but we're saying emotionally intelligent. It's about being able to keep your cool in a crisis. It's about being able to recognize other people's feelings, and that what you do and even your emotions, how they affect other people. Another example, I can use my son again. My kids can give me many examples. I'll leave my wife out of this thing as we're recording it and we're going to post it. I might end up in trouble, so my kids are okay. My son in grade 10 decided that he wasn't passing accountancy. Accountancy was difficult. He was going to swap over to biology because they told him this is an easy subject. He'll get through it. And I think the top score he managed up until halfway through matric was 19%. And in grade 11, we had a parent-teachers meeting. And I took him, I went and see the teacher, and we sat with the teacher. But I had a look at his report. And I noticed that their grade average was way higher than the class average. So you've got now a number of different classes. Those days we had A, B, C, D, E classes. But their particular class, the average was way lower than the actual grade average. So I asked the teacher, I said to him, explain this to me. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it should more or less be there, because then there's a problem. I know, but your kids are all stupid. And I thought, but what type of a teacher are you? Anyway, so all the other teachers went home, got home. So the first thing, obviously, because of biology, my son says, so what did my teacher say? What did my teacher say? I said, man, your teacher's an idiot. And I left it at that. And he got to matric, middle of the year, matric, gain 18, 17, 18%. I said to him, listen, I don't understand this. You're not doing this for me, you're not doing it for your mother, you're not doing it for anybody. You're doing this for you. You need to pass the subject, because at that stage, he was planning to do a sports coaching sciences diploma, and he needed biology, and he needed a minimum of 50% for matric. I said, but, so you can't go study. Yeah, but my teacher's an idiot. And then I suddenly realized that from a year back, he now remembered what I'd said, and he was emulating that because I'd said the teacher was an idiot. So it's my emotions because I was upset with the teacher because he said my child is stupid. I made a comment, and that comment had a negative effect down the line. The S is for sincerity. You need to build trust. On my website, I have a couple of little sayings that I've been posting on Twitter, and that we had, Jim has, it's not the drawing that matters, it's the drawing that matters. So these little sayings that we have, and one of the sayings that I have with trust is that as a leader, if the people don't trust your message, they are not going to follow you. So trust is important. We know that. I mean, we teach it to our kids. If I don't trust somebody, I don't want to associate with them. So trust is a big thing. And sincerity also means that you allow for failures and you forgive failures. Jim mentioned about failure as well. We've heard the story that, I don't know who said it, but they say that the only way a child learns to walk is it has to fall down. So you have to fail. But failure, there is no such thing as failure. Failure is only failure if you don't learn a lesson from the failure. I missed one, eh? Sorry, the R. I see Michael's making notes, and I just went back now. R is for reasonable. Okay, a blank, blonde moment there. R is for reasonable. Now, being reasonable means that you are flexible, but the most important part of being reasonable is that as a leader, you accept that you might not always be the expert in the situation. So you need to be able to, as a leader, take a back seat. I used the saying, Brant thought it very amusing. I said, there are times when you need to bite your tongue and shut up. And that's important. And I learned that lesson with my wife and with most of my friends and family. Up until a couple of years back, I was, I've got degrees and I've studied, and if I know that this particular thing is like that, don't argue with me. I'll take you on and I'll explain it to you. And I get into a heated argument with you, and at the end of the day, none of us wins. And I had a situation with my wife one day where she came home from work and she was tired and she was frustrated and upset, and I sat down and I said to her, how was your day? She said, you don't want to know. And she started, and they did this, and this person did this, and then my boss did this, and she was halfway through the sentence. I said to her, Labor Relations Act, that's illegal, CCMA. And she said to me, keep quiet. I don't want you to fix my problem, I just want you to listen. And I learned, and even now, sometimes my wife, obviously she knows me, I've been married for 29 years, so she can see it on my face. I can't hide my facial expressions, but I do manage to sit there and keep quiet, and I so desperately want to say something. It reminds me of the Labrador I had. We were sitting, there was this one particular dog, when our dog was in the backyard, this dog used to come, it looks like he was trying to purposely irritate our dog. So he used to come and wee in the plants here right in front, and then Zorro used to go absolutely nuts. And one particular day, the gate was open and this guy with his dog walked past, and that Labrador shot out there, and it was a story to try and get him, to prevent him from ripping this poor dog apart. And weeks later, we were sitting outside, it's hot, I'm sitting outside in the driveway, I'm sitting with a dog, and I see this dog coming along, and you can see the hair on Zorro's back standing up and going, and he wants to bark. I said to him, no, quiet. And he sits there and he looks at me and he goes, it's like he wants to bark, but he knows he's not allowed to bark. Now, I sometimes have those moments where I've got to sit and I've got to hang in there. I want to correct this person. I'm in skills development. I do training. I work with the seaters, all these things. And then I get these people and they come and tell you training how it works. And I think, and then my wife says to me afterwards, so you wanted to say something. I said, yeah, but I've decided that sometimes it's better just to keep quiet. So that's long explanation for reasonable. The H is humble. You need to be humble. And the best comparison would probably be to compare it to servant leadership, the concept that they've used, where you need to be of service. But one of the important things with humble is that you may have people in your team that are going through various emotional situations. Some of them might be going through trauma. Some of them might have had a tragedy in their life. And you need to, as a leader, allow people time to heal from those emotional scars that they have. So you can't, I mean, we know the story. I've heard it many times and I've used it many times in the past as a manager. When you come through the front door, you leave your personal problems there by the door. It doesn't work. It's impossible for a human to do that. So as a leader, you need to adapt and you need to work with that and you need to get through that process. I has to do with information sharing. I said earlier, if they don't trust your message, we use the word message, and I drive message, and the whole concept with a message, it could be your vision, it could be your goals, it could be your objectives. It's what you want to achieve, the end result you want to achieve. But you need to communicate that on a regular basis. There's no point in having a vision and having a strategy, and you're the only person that knows what it is. The rest of the people in the organization don't. You're not going to get where you want to get. A friend of mine was planning on writing a book because this frustrated him that there was no communication. There was communication up but never down in the organizations that he worked with. And he was going to write a book called Does Your Janitor Know Where You're Going? Fortunately, the book hasn't materialized yet. The last letter is P. It stands for passion. You need to be passionate as a leader, what you do. You need to be passionate about your vision, your goal, your message. You need to be passionate about being successful. You need to be passionate about the success of your team and that. And that passion needs to be contagious. But the next component of the process of leadership, so we've got the leadership flag. The next component I want to just latch on, because passion comes out there again, is what we call the leadership formula. Now, it's not really a mathematical formula. We've written it as a mathematical formula. And based on the chat we've just had with Jim, I would have loved to have had a flip chart and I could have drawn the formula for you. But roughly the formula is M to the S times M to the E equals C. The M to the S is your message. If you multiply that by a number of mentees, which is M to the E, you will then become a catalyst leader, which is the C. The message component has 3 subdivisions. The one being determination, other one is conviction, and the third one is passion. And that's where I want to link back with the passion now. So you need to have conviction of your message. If you are trying to get people to achieve a goal or achieve an end result, you need to be convicted. You need to eat, sleep, drink that message. You need to be convinced that there is no other message. And you need to be resilient and determined about that message. You mustn't be swayed. You mustn't let people put you off the message. And then you also need to be passionate. Passionate to the point where your passion is so contagious that the other people actually accept your message as their own. And they make it their own. And in that way, they then drive your message further. I'm going to use my daughter as an example. My daughter's been crazy about dance, and she was 4 years old. The first time when we went camping, there was this woman at a dance school and decided there was nothing for the kids to do, and she got and she got all these kids together, and my daughter stood in front there watching her, and as she learned them. And we realized that she has a talent for dance. So we enrolled in dance schools, and she's danced competitively for years. She's now 25 years old. Next year she'll be 26, and she's a qualified dance teacher. She teaches dance at a private British school in Qatar. But after school, while she was studying for dance, she's this big, and she says she's heavy-boned. But she's a little bit stocky. Even if she loses weight, she's got, from all the years of dancing, these big thighs and that. There's no fat on it, but it's... And the drama dance school that she was at, where she did a dance major, they had a heavy emphasis on ballet. And for years, they used to nail her about her size. She needs to lose weight. She's not thin enough. Doesn't look like these ballerinas and that. But she actually hates ballet with a passion. Funny part is she's now a ballet teacher. And they carried on and they carried on. And it got to a point where she started getting despondent. And I eventually had a meeting with the principal, and I sat there and I said to her, if you ever say anything about my daughter's weight again, you and I are going to have a major issue with one another. And then she said to me, but she needs to lose weight. She will never get cast, and she'll never be able to perform. And yeah, my daughter looked at this, and she wanted to give up. And we had a chat about it. And then I said to her, but what is it that you want to do? She says, I just want to be involved with dance. I said, well, why perform? Why not coach? Teach dance. And she made the switch. She was about to give up, but because she was so passionate about it, she decided to stick with it, and she made the switch, and she became a brilliant dance teacher. She, the year after that, choreographed a whole musical for her school that she was at, all by herself. Put the whole thing together. It was an absolute... So she had the talent, but she was just focusing it in the wrong direction, and they could have killed that passion, but she decided to stick with it. I didn't check how much time I have. The M to the E is for the mentee. So that message that you have, that you drive with conviction and passion and believe in, and it becomes part of your life. If that passion is so contagious, then these people that you are mentoring, they need to then take that message on, and you need to be so passionate that they make that message their own. And you need to mentor them to accept that message and to drive it further and spread it further. Under the mentee, we have also 3 components. The one is pressure, the other one is time, and the third one is failure. So we're saying you need to apply pressure. If you want that person to accept your message, you want that person to change, the sum of the formula is C. C being a catalyst leader. Catalyst, we know, is a change agent. So the idea being is that you want to develop other leaders. And you're only going to do that if you mentor them and you get them to a point. But the pressure is that we all have our own little comfort zone. And we feel uncomfortable doing things that we think we don't know how to do. The pressure that you apply is you apply that pressure to force them out of their comfort zone and to grow and to develop and go further. The time, it's important to remember that nothing happens overnight. So whatever you're teaching person, you have to allow for time. Sometimes it could take years, sometimes it could take months, but you have to allow time. And every now and then, if you want to use time to apply pressure, you can move up the deadline slightly and put them under a little bit of pressure to see how they operate in it. The failure is very important. You have to allow for failure. I can guarantee you not one of us got everything right the first time we tried it. We all fell down flat on our face. Some of us a number of times. I can remember as a child, my father used to say, a donkey only bangs his head once. So we must be worse than donkeys, because I know I've failed at the same thing a couple of times. Edison is probably the worst, Thomas Edison. I mean, he failed what? Actually, no, sorry, he said he didn't fail. He found 1,000 ways how not to invent a light bulb. But imagine if those people had failed and they'd given up. A guy like Richard Branson, we all know Richard Branson. He was dyslexic, he didn't even finish school. Einstein was told by his teachers he's too stupid to get to do anything, and look where Einstein ended up. So there's lots of examples of people that have failed and how they've got to where they are. I mean, I could spend all night going through them. If you want a couple more, buy the book. They're all in the book. what's important to remember, if you have the message, you drive the message with passion and conviction, and you mentor the person and you allow for failure, you can then become a catalyst. The formula works if you have a message and you can have more than one mentee, which means you can be a multiple catalyst. Where the formula doesn't work is if you have more than one message. If you have more than one message, the C doesn't be catalyst anymore. It now changes to confusion. Because that's what's going to happen. Your mentee is not going to know where, because you're going to be changing direction all the time. I mean, I've seen it a number of times with people. My son, again, is another example. When he was small, I used to send him to go do things, and I give him 3 or 4 instructions at a time, and then he does one, and then I find him sitting there watching TV, and I said, so? No, but I did so and so. I said, but what about that and that? Oh no, he forgot. So we've got to learn, we've got to have a message. We can change our message. You don't have to keep the same message. You can change your message, but you only must have one at a time. That's important. The last piece of the puzzle, we've got the leadership flag, which are the attributes that a leader needs to have. We have the leadership formula, which is the process that you follow in developing other people to become leaders and becoming a catalyst leader. The last concept is called the core of the cabbage. Now, my friend Penny that I spoke to you about earlier, he is one of these people, if you ever get to know him, you will know that he's a person that don't tell him it can't be done or that, then he'll go and he'll prove you wrong. And he at one stage was busy with the cabbage and that, and he wanted to know why do people throw that white core away in the middle? Why can't you use that core? And what he did was he then decided to do a little experiment. So he took the core, and he threw it with a couple of leaves in a pressure cooker and threw some spices and a bit of sugar with it, and he stuck it in the pressure cooker for an hour. And when he took it out, he had this soft, gooey type substance, and it was actually quite sweet. It was nice to eat in it. And then we took this and we trademarked the concept. What we basically did is we sort of dissed the peel the onion concept. Because if you take an onion and you peel it, the idea is the correct idea, that you peel away these layers to get to the problem. But the problem with peeling an onion, if you keep peeling it far enough, what do you get to? Nothing. What's your battery flat? Plan B. So if you peel it far enough, you get to nothing. If you peel an onion far enough, you get to nothing. But if you take a cabbage and you peel away at the cabbage, eventually you get to this hard, bitter core. And if you look at business practices these days, what do? What does everybody do with the cabbage? They core the cabbage. They cut it out and they toss it. And we do the same in the workplace. I have a worker that's not towing the line, or he's late all the time. What do? I fire him. And then I hire another one and I train them, and then I fire them, and then I hire another one and I train them and I fire them. Why not apply a bit of pressure and put them in a pressure cooker? So you go through the pressure with the time, you allow for a bit of failure, and you work on that person, and you eventually convert them into something that's sweet and edible and enjoyable. It can be done. I mean, if you look at, the Pew Institute, these guys in America that do these studies and that, they've done studies that they reckon that it costs 10 times a person's annual salary to train somebody up that you've got rid of. It's cheaper to retrain and work with somebody that's already there than to appoint somebody new and train them to get them to that point. I had a girl that worked for me years ago. She started off, she came out of varsity, she was first year university, had a little bit of a glipsie, and ended up being pregnant. And then she needed to find work. And her mother happened to be my children's Sunday school teacher. So she came to me and said, don't you need somebody to work for you? I said, well, I have this little office, it's like 18 square meters. Yeah, but let her come in Mondays and Wednesday mornings and maybe Friday, and I'll pay her a couple of bucks, and she can answer the phone and do a bit of filing. And eventually the business grew, we moved to a bigger office, and she started working full-time in that. And she developed to a point where she became my training manager. She ran the office. But it took about 9 years to get there. My problem now is every time I employ somebody new, I'm expecting her. I didn't realize that it took me 9 years to get her to where she was. I now want this person to be there. And I don't have time. I don't have 9 years to train another one. And that's the problem that we have. We need to be aware that it's a lot easier to retain the person that you have and rather try and improve and change the way their habits and things than to fire them and get somebody else. It just takes so much longer and costs you so much more money. The core of the cabbage is a concept that we would like to see applied to this generation gap problem that we have in the workplace. At the moment, I speak under correction, but I read somewhere the other day that at the moment 75% of the world's population is made up of millennials. Now, you guys look at you all more or less my age, so the millennials are our children. They're those kids that are born here from 1992, 93 till just after the turn of the century. But they have totally different values to us. That's that guy you have a meeting and he rocks up 10 minutes late and he doesn't think anything of it. He's the one that, you know, he would rather go have a braai on Friday afternoon than do. They're totally different. To them, work or job satisfaction is a lot more important than loyalty. We were taught to go the extra mile, to put in the hard graft. And this causes frustration and friction in the workplace because your current captains of industry are mostly baby boomers like us. And now I've got this little pipsqueak that's coming in who's old enough to be my son, and he now wants to do things differently. The problem is that I can't expect him to change. I have to change. Because he's the future of the industry. I'm on my way out. But if you use this core of the cabbage, you can sit and work and you can develop a relationship and you can make them work. So, in closing, what I would like to say, we've now listened to Jim talking about speaking and using drawings and the present, what do you call it, the animation gap, that process. So it has to do with how you present yourself, how you present stuff. Brunt, I think, is going to talk to us, or he's still going to talk on branding yourself, and if there's time. But effectively, all of these tie into this whole leadership concept that I'm talking about as well, because the way you present determines whether you are successful in what it is you're presenting. When you're branding yourself, you're trying to develop a name for yourself out there. You're trying to get people to recognize you and to accept you as some sort of an entity or persona. So if we look at especially the leadership flag and this whole process of being a leader, it's all about your reputation. You need to ensure that you have a reputation. As far as possible, it needs to be squeaky clean. Unfortunately, we are humans and we will make mistakes. Chantal, sorry, I didn't mention her name, but the girl that worked for me, she had a poster up in her office that said, "To err is human. To pass the buck shows management potential." So fortunately, I consider myself a leader and not a manager.